Okay, welcome back. We're on page 92 talking about the use of single quotes versus double quotes. I'm going to go back to here and put this back to single quotes. And now this guy is kind of happy. Whoops, except I have extra ones in there somehow. Okay, now it's very happy. Now, admittedly, the book doesn't do this. The book uses double quotes, but the machine here is using single quotes because wouldn't it be kind of cool if you could put it in one place and just copy and paste it without worrying? So it's sort of like be on the safe side and use single quotes here. Okay, that's a good rule. The textbook doesn't talk about it, but hey. Before we leave the thing on fonts, there's a particular font out there called, and by the way, this is optional. I don't have to have all three of these things. I mean, I could, but I could just say I want a particular thing called Verdana. So I'm just going to say, look, that's the one I want, dang it. I don't want anything else, except no substitutes. So I'm going to get rid of this guy. So yes, you can do this. And what will happen is the machine will try its best. It'll look at that and go, you know, I don't necessarily have this Verdana font, but I bet I can find something. They're pretty smart. Browsers are pretty smart. If you say, I want exactly this and nothing else, it's going to say, well, I don't have that, but I can get you somewhere close. By the way, this particular font is the font of champions. No, this particular font is the one that is recommended for accessibility. And if I go here and type V one more time, this is what's recommended. Verdana, Geneva, Tahoma, and Sans Serif. That's the best, makes things the most readable. So particularly when your screen size gets kind of small, if you kind of look at this, it looks like bigger. Now these are actually the same size fonts. It just looks weird. They're physically larger in a lot of spaces, and if you're dyslexic, there's only one set of characters, which are like it's the P and the B that are exact same shape. They've just been reversed. Okay, so I'm just telling you this is the recommended font for doing accessibility. Okay. All right. There is a technique on page 94 where they talk about, yes, you can actually embed a font. If you had I don't know, you were doing a science fiction website and you wanted to put a word in Klingon on your web page, most likely average people with average browsers are not going to have the Klingon font installed on their iPad. Okay? So no matter what you put out there, I mean, if I go here and say Klingon, the machine's going to say, I don't have a clue what the heck you're talking about. So one technique is to embed the font. Give them the font. And so I would give them a font inside my head. We're not going to do that here, but I'm just talking about it. But actually provide them a font file. So you provide them a font file to use if they don't have it already. Cool. All right. Again, we're not going to demo that. I'm just talking about it. Okay, font size is the next one. So if I go in here and say, well, first of all, font size. I'm going to go here to this. I'm going to put a semicolon so I can continue. Remember how we have one of these guys, multiple declarations. Font size sounds like two words, doesn't it? So font size, isn't that pretty cool? And then there's a bunch of interesting things you can do. Just like color had lots of different ways to do it, well, font size has the exact same thing. I'm going to go through this rather quickly, and I'm not going to demo them all like I did with color. But basically, there are 5 different ways that you can talk about text size. One is words. I can go in here and say small or large. Let's use large. Large. Okay. So I'm going to run this. Well, no, I'm not. Heck with it. That's one way of doing it. The other one is giving it by the pixels. So if you go to page 93, look at table 3.3. Another technique is I can say, look, I want this thing to be 10 pixels high. Okay, cool. The next one is 10 points high. It's the same technique. It's just in the word processing world, and if you're ever into print media, you use points, and I'm not going to explain it all, but basically points is just another way of talking about font size. The other one's called EM, and again, if you're into typology, you know that the uppercase letter M was one of the largest of the fonts. There were the letters. You know, an I would be relatively small, right? And M's and W's are pretty wide, so they picked M as like the widest one of the letters, capital M. And so an EM is relative to the letter M. So bottom line is there's 5 different ways you can do this. So text, you know, large, pixel, font, EM, and percent. So the web people, the web standard people, really want you to use either the EM thing or the percent thing, okay? And each one of these things has a unit of measure. So I could say, so for EM, 1 EM is normal, okay? 1 EM. So if I said 1.5 EM, that means 1.5 or 150%. Okay, that's what that means. In fact, I'm going to go here, block quote, and I'm going to add an attribute here. Whoops, I'm sorry, a style attribute. And I'm going to say font size. And here I'm going to say 150%. Whoop. Okay. Now notice there's no space. It's not like that. Okay, it's not 1.5 space EM or 150 space. Okay, no space between the number and the unit of measure. Does that sound like a test question to you guys? What do you think? Okay, I haven't rendered this in a while. I don't think I messed it up any. Oh, okay, cool. So I made it a little bit larger. Yay! 100, made it 50% larger than it was. So font size. Okay, so both EM and percent are basically what it means is relative to what the browser has figured out. So if I'm on an iPad or a phone and I'm looking at a web page, it's going to render probably in relatively small pixel sizes. It's going to, I'm guessing, probably like 8 pixels high or something, if it's really, really tiny text looking at a screen. Okay, but how do I know the screen resolution? Maybe you've got one of the really cool iPads with the Retina display, and it's got gazillion number of pixels per inch. Or I'm on an old phone from a couple years old, and the pixel density is around 80 pixels per inch. So let's see, 200 pixels an inch to 80 pixels an inch. How is this going to render on the screen? That's why a lot of these other suggestions, like pixels, they're giving you a false sense of, wow, it's going to be 10 pixels high. The hell it will. What basically happens is the browser looks at it and says, I know what the size of my screen is, and so I'm going to render this the best I can. And if you want it larger, just tell me that you want it some percent larger than that. Don't try to do the math and say, well, I want it to be 10 pixels high. It's like, no. That's why the W3C recommendation is always EM, relative units of measure, such as EM and percent. Okay. Font weight, I'm not going to go through these and demo them, but I could say font weight bold. Cool. Font style, italics. That's cool. Line height. Line height of 200 would make something double space. Cool. All right. Text align. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to do text align on this one guy right here. So I'm going to say, so do I have to use the word style here? Yeah, but it's used as an attribute. So style. And I'm going to say text dash, what was it? Text align. Cool. Colon. And then I want to say center. Text align center. By the way, we did this. Remember we did a centering on the first day, and I told you we did it wrong. Well, now we're actually doing it the right way. Okay, so font alignment. Okay, cool. So, text indent, basically, you know how in formal writing, the first line of a paragraph is indented. That's the same thing here. I don't have a paragraph with more than one line in it, so I'm not going to demo it. So I could say text indent, and in the old days, you would say like 5 characters, right? Well, how do I tell it 5 characters in web speak? Remember that EM thing? EM is the width of the letter M. So if I want 5 spaces, I tell it 5 EM. Cool. All right. Text decoration is the next one on there. You can do underline and strike through. You can just play with these things. Text transform. This thing, you can make it all uppercase. Make it screaming caps, full caps. You can make it lowercase. You can make it sentence case. Those kind of things. Letter spacing. Now, I'll admit, letter spacing you would probably only use if you had like a giant. I don't know. You had like a 3 in the IBM or something. A big IBM logo across the top, that appeared on the screen being like an inch tall or bigger. Maybe you don't want it squashed together. You want to separate the letters a bit to make it, look more like a logo rather than just text. Okay, so letter spacing. Word spacing, I have never used the words, the spacing between the words. I've never used that. White space. Remember we talked about how the traditional rule for white space is to collapse. So that if I had a blank line above and a blank line below, and I put them side by side, they would collapse and only be one blank line. Remember that? Okay. If I have multiple spaces, like Mary had a little and did space, it's going to take those spaces and collapse them down to one. Okay. So I could use CSS to alter that behavior. Normal, which is what we've been always using. There's one called no wrap, which means the lines do not wrap around when they get to the end. Now, quite frankly, I can't think of a reason why you'd ever want to use that. Really. I mean, you want people to take the scroll bar and move it? Why the heck would you want that? And then the other one is called pre-formatted, which basically means don't collapse a white space. Okay, cool. Text shadow. That's kind of a cool one. So let's do a text shadow. I got enough time to do that. So here we go. So I'm going to go here and say text dash shadow. Now, remember up here in font family how things were separated by commas, right? Verdana, comma, Geneva, comma, right? Here, they're not using commas. Because these were like options. These were like, use that or that or that or that. Basically, a comma list means I really, really want Verdana. But if you don't have that, I'll take Geneva. If you don't have that, I'll take Tahoma. If you don't have that, I'll take whatever the heck you got. That's a sans serif style. This is not like that. This isn't, I'll take this, but if you don't have it, this is, I need 3 or 4 things here. So I'm going to go here and tell it what it is that I want. I'm going to say, 20 pixels, 20 pixels, space, 20 pixels. Okay. So I'm using spaces here and not using commas. I know it's a little confusing. So, wow. Okay, apparently making this 20, 20, and 20 makes that look ridiculous. Okay, a bad example, but anyway, probably the blur is the part that I had wrong, the last one. So it has several parts to it. It's got horizontal separation, vertical separation, the amount of blur, which I obviously blew it. And then you could have another one called color, so like perhaps a shade of gray. Okay, we reached the 15-minute mark, and we'll pick this thing up again in just a few.